Hey, good morning, guys. It is January 19th. Um, Tried recording this once, and my iPad storage was full, so we tried this again. Um, Chambers is dealing today with Abram. God finds Abram, makes him a promise to make him a father of great nations, and Abram trusts God. He believes God. The Bible says it was credited to him as righteousness. And in Genesis 15 is where Chambers takes his excerpt from. It says a horror of great darkness fell upon him. So Chambers is listening to God. He's in a deep sleep. God put him in a deep sleep, and as he does with a lot of prophets and people who he calls, and gives him a message. And the what happens afterwards is interesting. So the Bible says he believed God, and then he shares this message God gave him, this vision God gave him, and he shares it with others. And so Sarah is part of this. He says he'll make him a father of great nations. Look up to the skies, count the stars, and so shall your descendants be. And so Sarah then proceeds to, as any common sense person would, figure out how God's going to make this happen. And that's kind of the crux of what Chambers is talking about today, is letting other people or even ourselves kind of figure out how God is going to do what God is going to do, and to help him along, because God needs help, right? So, and Chambers even says halfway through this first chapter, never try and help God fulfill his word. God doesn't need, and then fill in anything after that. God doesn't need your help, your money, your time, your energy. We give that because that is what we need in our devotion to God. We need to give. We need to give our time. We need to give our energy. That is our need. We need that. But God doesn't need us. He doesn't need our time or energy. But anyway, he doesn't need help. And so Sarah then in chapter 16 says, oh, I know what we'll do. We're going to give, because there's no heir. There's no blood heir in Abram's line. There's just somebody like a servant of his who has had a son in his household, and that will be the heir to his any wealth or any kind of lineage he has will be through that, because he has no blood heir. So Sarah says, "Hey, let's do this. Which is probably common practice in the culture. Let's bear a child through my maidservant, and we'll call that child ours." And so, but anyway, that's where God kind of lets Abram do this. He tries to do it in his own power and own wisdom, and help from Sarah too, and kind of her helping him try to figure this out. And years later, he says, "This is not the promised one. This is not your first son." God even rejects Ishmael as a son. You know, he says God later says, "Take Isaac, your son, your only son." And so God repeats, "Hey, listen, this is not the promise. This is not even, in my eyes, it's not even your son." And so it's this encouragement Chambers gives us to, if we are hearing from God, if we are trusting in God, to make sure that we are completely trusting and not trying to figure things out. He says, have I any confidence in the flesh? The second paragraph here, have I any confidence in the flesh, or have I got beyond all confidence in myself and men and women of God, in books and prayers and ecstasies? In my confidence is placed now, and in my confidence placed, sorry, one more time, and is my confidence placed now in God himself, not in his blessings. So a lot of times even we get that confused. We see the blessings of God, we say, oh wow, he's approving everything I'm doing because he's blessing me. And as soon as God becomes real, other people become shadows. Last story, I love stories from the Bible, and the one that kind of stands out to me is when David approaches Goliath, and in the valley, he sees the two armies, and David says, God's going to remove this uncircumcised Philistine from the face of the earth. David already has this confidence. But then he goes to Saul, and Saul doesn't have the same confidence. And Saul tries to figure this out. And he says, hey, we can figure this out, David. First of all, he says, no, you can't go. You're a youth, and he's been a fighting man from his youth. And then he says, well, maybe this kid, maybe he can do something. Or this young man throws all his armor on him. And David says, these are untested. I can't do this. And then finally Saul says, it's really interesting, because Saul sees something in David, and what he sees in David is David's connection to God, to God's truth, to God's promise, and he says, go. And so Saul says go to this young man, And it's just this indication that once David kind of has heard from God, whatever anyone else says, his brothers, the other soldiers, even King Saul himself, doesn't matter. God says, go kill him, go kill Goliath. And so, anyway, I would say that's the first thing to do is make sure we are hearing from God, and then trust it and don't be swayed by other people's opinions. Thanks, guys.